Today on Core Conversations, we have Alexa Idama. Alexa is a Pilates instructor that also has a yoga background. Originally from Cameroon, she has a passion for bringing Pilates to people of all backgrounds and to her homeland. Being a Black Pilates instructor, she discussed her desire to see more people like her in the studios. We touched on topics of race, having a seat at the table, social empowerment, and our pitch to Gratz for a project in Africa. Enjoy the conversation.
So I'm Alexa Idama, and while I don't have necessarily my own physical location anywhere, my business is to open doors in the Pilates community to people who look like me, so brown and Black people, people who I don't normally see at the studio, and hopefully just create a space where they feel like they can take part in and enjoy the benefits of this practice. That is, everyone who's on this call probably knows how beneficial this practice is. And I want to change the current way things are done, where it feels like it's exclusive, that those benefits are reserved almost exclusively for one community.
And now, Alexa, you're from Africa?
I will say Cameroon.
Cameroon. Because
Yes,
Africa's
I'm Cameroon.
it's funny, like so many times I have to correct people on it, and I just did it myself.
Yes.
Africa's a continent.
Exactly.
There are countries within that continent. So it's
Yes.
like me saying, so you're from North America, is that correct? Like,
exactly. Or when people say you're from, like ask a European person, so you're from Europe, while I don't want to say Africa is a continent, and we are all, I think Africans always recognize each other as one people. But yes. I feel like my original identity was not, I never went around as a kid saying I'm African. I always said, I'm Cameroonian. And okay. Even now, when people ask me, like when people ask me where I'm from, I never think, oh, I'm from Africa. I think I'm from Cameroon.
Mm-hmm. And the reason why I brought that up is because, we throw around the term African American. Mm-hmm. You are African American.
In I guess in a certain sense.
In a certain sense.
Yes. However, the longer I live here, the more careful I am with saying that I'm African American, because the honest truth is that I had the privilege of not being African American until 10 years ago. And even the first few years that I lived here, I don't think I quite understood what it meant to be African American or a Black person in America. I mean, we were so caught up in setting ourselves up, buying a house and, getting work and, kind of settling into the society that and I had a newborn baby too. So a lot of the things that I'm now over the last, I wouldn't say 5 to 6 years are really coming into, my sight. I think I wasn't even able to see when I first moved here. And there is a lot of privilege in not having to live certain things as they're happening. Yes. So I don't want to, so when we're talking about me being an African American, I cannot claim to have lived the experience that people who have been here all their lives have lived. And that's, it's not that I'm rejecting it, but I'm not going to claim that I've gone through the same things as people who have, they've had to deal with certain types of behavior and certain types of, treatment their whole lives. And I can't say that I've had that.
And, and that's why I brought that up, because myself living in Canada mm-hmm. and the mindset of being a mosaic, I can say I'm a Canadian, but my parents are from Jamaica, mm-hmm. though I was born in Toronto. So I'm a second generation mm-hmm. Jamaican, second generation Canadian, or that sort of thing. You can spin it however you want, but the bottom line is, likewise, I don't have the same shared experience as an African American who was mm-hmm. born in New York or Atlanta or wherever and have mm-hmm. just these accumulated positive or negative experiences of being Black in America that we're bringing mm-hmm. to the table. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's just interesting. So for those of you watching, you have a different voice here. You have a Canadian voice, and you have a Cameroonian voice on Black people in Pilates that are coming at you as we have this conversation. So I just
Yes.
wanted to kind of set the stage with that.
Mm-hmm. But with that being said, I am like, now that I am here and now that I am Black in America, I'm not treated differently from, you know, like other Black, like we're all treated the same. So
Yes.
it's not like people see me and they see that I haven't lived the experience of an African American, and they treat me, they give me a privilege in that sense. Here, you know, I don't have the privilege of the privilege of being a person first before being Black. So now that I'm here, I'm in the same pot as everybody else.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like in the Pilates world from that pot?
So it's interesting. I want to, you know, I'll be honest, the Pilates world is very white. There are, you know, like from my perspective, I mean, all the studios I go to have, you know, I'm one of the only, if not the only person, like Black person there. So that is why I'm coming from the perspective of, you know, we need to invite more people in, and maybe it takes people seeing somebody like me to feel welcomed into that space. So I think it is important that I stay in the space, even though it can sometimes be a little bit, I don't know, I don't know if I have the right terminology even to describe it, but it can be a little bit awkward. So
Uncomfortable?
so uncomfortable. Well, I don't necessarily want to use the word uncomfortable because you know, like I'm generally just me wherever I go, and I feel like part of the not having grown up here allows me to almost, I don't know, ignore certain things that you know, might affect people who've had to deal with the microaggressions their whole life. You know, yeah, that it might not quite, I might not take it in quite the same way. So I don't want to say I feel uncomfortable, but I definitely notice that there isn't many people like me. And I also notice that when I'm at a studio, people come to me. You know, like people who look like me come to me. They, you know, yeah. So yes. So if anyone if anyone else is uncomfortable, hopefully I can create a space that makes them more comfortable. And you were mentioning, you know, one big table a few minutes ago. Hopefully I can open the door so that other people can sit at the table too. And I know I'm not the only one doing this. You know, there is many other teachers out there who are, you know, even more heavily involved in creating a seat at the table. But hopefully I can be a small part of that.
That's all that is really required of any of us, is to do our small part.
Yes.
We don't have to lead the charge with 6,000 people behind us. We just need to do what we can do from where we are. And you're doing a great job of that.
Yeah, and hopefully we can continue the work. Yeah, and you know, who knows, maybe in 10 years it'll look completely different. You know, I will also say I came out of the yoga space before I entered the Pilates space. And I've kind of seen over the years the changes. You know, when I kind of started with yoga, same thing as what I see in Pilates now. There were very few people of color, and only the same people of color were getting brought to the table all the time, right? You know, you had like, I remember when I first started, it was Rodney Yee, and you know, he's not Black, but he was like almost like the token brownish person in the industry. And if you had his DVD, you were not prejudiced because you had Rodney Yee's DVD, right? But I feel like, yeah, so I feel like over the years, I have definitely seen, you know, like I've definitely seen a little bit more inclusion in the yoga industry. You start to see a lot more people a lot more Black people, you know, doing yoga. And I've kind of observed how that has happened. That has partially happened due to people just speaking up. And it's also happened because people have formed friendships and alliances with teachers in that space. And those teachers have invited, you know, they've helped open. Well, I never want to give like white people the sole credit for bringing us into a space, but I definitely know that the friendships in the space have helped, you know, people's voices be heard.
Yes. Well
And
said. Oh,
mhm.
sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
And I feel like that's what's needed in the Pilates space. Like in the Pilates space, I will say the same thing. Like I see a couple of Black teachers always, and not that I want to fault anybody for the great work that they're doing, because all the Black people and people of color in the space are representing, but it's always the same people. While I think like the group that I'm part of, Black Girl Pilates, has 430 plus members.
Yes.
Like what's happening, and some of those women are, well, all of those women are great teachers, but
All
some
of
of
them.
those women are, I mean, incredible. I'm like, where are they on Pilates Anytime? Where are they on Pilatesology? How can I work with, if I sign up to these platforms, how can I take their class? Everybody needs to be taking class with these women. And
Yes.
we need to be learning from them, and men. I don't want to discount the men,
No,
but
I follow you. Though. Go.
I'm part of Black Girl Pilates, so I kind of interact with them a lot more.
Hmm.
And I wish I would just be able to see more of that. I know in the current climate, I've seen a couple of events coming up, and I see the same faces again. And like I said, it's not that I don't want to see those faces, but why no new faces? Why just the same safe old faces? You know. Um,
Yes.
yeah. So I want to encourage the community to maybe not just be diverse with 3 people, but be diverse with all of us.
There's a gentleman in this area. I'm not going to mention his name, but he
Mm-hmm.
in Toronto area, and he's very, very affluent as a Black man, half
Mm-hmm.
Chinese, half Black,
Mm-hmm.
and I think he's in finances, but like very, very, very well off. Manages a
Mm-hmm.
huge client base or whatever the case is. One of the things that he did with his money was put it into a major like art type exhibit thing
Mm-hmm.
in the Toronto area. And he got criticism for choosing to put his money there. The Black community asked, well, why didn't you put it into the little Jamaica area in Yonge and Eglinton? Or why didn't you do this for more socioeconomic advancement for Black people? Or why didn't you? So there was a Black person who had a seat at the table, and
Mm-hmm.
he got accused of not making room for other people at the table, when in fact he actually was making room
Mm-hmm.
at the table by celebrating the arts and celebrating diversity and all these different things, and put his name on certain things. And I feel like sometimes at the same time, like you said earlier, we give so much credit to white people for getting us a seat at the table, and sometimes there's Black people that actually have a seat at the table, and we feel like they're not making room for other Black people to get to the
Mm-hmm.
table. And I feel like sometimes that's a disparity, and that's when we start to butt heads with one another as a people, when we're
Mm-hmm.
not celebrating the ways that we are making our change, the ways that we're affecting change in our
Mm-hmm.
communities. So it's just an interesting dialogue, because we want to point the finger at white people, and then there's Black people pointing the finger at Black people as well when they are doing their part.
Well, I mean,
And
I'm not like, and that's not what I'm saying at all. Like,
no,
I'm
no,
not
I know you're
saying,
not
yes,
saying
I'm
that.
not saying
Yes,
that at
yes,
all, that, I'm not saying at all that the people who have a seat at the table or who are being called for these events are not creating space for others, because oftentimes they're not the ones organizing the events.
mm-hmm.
Like it's like how I've gotten invited to your talks, and I'm just responding to that. And all I will encourage the Pilates community to do is have an awareness of who else is out there. I mean, you've had a lot of people on your chat sessions or on your lives.
Yes,
So why am I not seeing Maria Erla at some of these events? Why she's a great teacher,
yes,
and she's it's not like she was trained by Kathy Grant. So why am I not seeing her?
mm-hmm.
Why is she mainly self-promoting? Like,
Right.
why aren't we promoting, like some of the women? And
That's a great point.
and I also want to be careful. And I'm not an anti-racism educator, so I only have like my experience and my way of seeing things. But one thing we also have to question is every time one of these events happens, they are white led. And a big, a big discussion point in, the anti-racism community has been that if you're having an event to promote or to educate on or benefit, anti-racism within your space, then that event needs to be Black-led. And I feel like, I completely, I appreciate all the efforts that are being made. And I know everybody, now this, the whole climate right now has kind of brought into certain people's awareness, almost like, oh my gosh, I have not been doing enough, or I have not been doing my part. And then there's this scramble, like almost this like, all right, I got to do something to show that I'm not part of the problem and that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And in the madness to do all of that, what happens is oftentimes the, Black voices are silenced yet again. And in the process of silencing the Black voices, we create more of a problem. So it's
interesting.
Yes. So with some of the, events that are happening, or with some of the, I know that there's some like online conferences that are like donation based, or people have been doing classes. While there is the standard, inclusion of some people of color, it would have been nice to see some, it would have just been nice to see some new faces. And I think there's a lot of us out there who would say yes if we were asked, but I don't think we're getting asked. I think people are like, okay, I know this is my friend, I know him, I've worked with him before, I've worked with her before, so I'm just going to get her on again. Yes. So I see that you have a couple.
Yeah, that's Momentum Fest, and this is one that Maria mentioned yesterday.
Yes.
So that it's an inclusive roundtable, and I can't read all. My picture is actually blocking out the rest of it, but that's an example of something that is happening. That to your point,
yes,
is a lesser known event,
and we need more of that.
But we need more of that. And I wonder too. One of the things that you said a minute ago, which I didn't want to let go, is there's people out there that are trying to not be part of the problem, and there's people out there who are trying to be part of the solution. Those are two different things.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like anytime, and I think it's human nature when you get confronted by something that's uncomfortable, in you, there is a tendency to want to, almost like say, no, it's not me. Like I'm not actually guilty of that. And here, let me show you how. It's like, so I feel like to a certain extent that's human nature to want to do that. But I think in this particular instance, it's really important to recognize when that's happening, and maybe work on that behavior. And like I said, there are people who are actively working to find a solution or to create change and make a difference. And I feel like the first step to becoming that kind of person is recognizing when you are not that person, is recognizing when you are not part of the solution, when you are not helping, so I think, I encourage everybody who's watching this to go get a little bit more educated and not just do something, educate yourselves on what is helpful behavior versus harmful behavior. And I feel like if you come back with some of that knowledge, you'll definitely be able to be more, or you'll be able to be part of the solution versus, perpetuating the problem.
Speaking of healthy behaviors,
yes.
Can we talk about how you discovered Pilates?
So like I mentioned, I was in the yoga community for a really long time, and I actually I work at Lifetime, and the yoga studio and the Pilates studio are right next to each other. Okay. And I've worked for Lifetime now for about 11 years. And for about, I would say about 7 years of those 11, I would go to my office and walk past the Pilates office, And I would just be like, they're doing something strange in there, right? I remember somebody gave me an intro once, and it was a particularly bad intro where, you know, like none of it translated into useful, like into anything useful in my body. And I kind of thought, why would I ever do this again? And, you know, like about 3 years, almost 3 years ago now, I have a friend, a fellow yoga teacher who was going through Pilates teacher training. And, you know, like we all need bodies when we're in training.
Right.
And she had me come in and be her, you know, like just practice with her. And from that very first session, I kind of thought, why, like, Alexa, you've been so stupid. You have walked past this studio and, you know, you actually get a discount on this working here. And you have not, and I think from that moment, my only thought was, when can I do Pilates again? How
Right.
and when and where? And, you know, like how can I do this again? So yeah, so the last 3 years has been like almost like an obsession to, you know, like learn more and get more involved and share this, because if, you know, I came to yoga because I was having a lot of joint problems from all the running and high intensity work that I was doing, as, you know, like as a personal trainer and as a fitness instructor, and just generally trying to be a healthy person, not knowing necessarily how to do things the right way. So I came to yoga because I had so much joint pain that I was like, it must be stretching. I must be really tight, so I need to come stretch. And, you know, yoga is great. It's, you know, it's definitely taught me a lot about my body and myself too. And I'm very glad for the journey that I had with yoga. However, what I felt my yoga teachers never focused on was stabilizing, you know, around, you know, stabilizing your body when you're going through movement.
Right.
And that in itself, you know, like when I took my first Pilates class, or when I had that first Pilates session, you know, just the concept of trying to find range of motion, but in a stable way. It just almost like it woke me up in a completely different sense. And yeah, so I don't know if that answers the question, but that's how I came to Pilates, and I have just been on a mission to learn as much as I can since I came in, and, you know, bring as many people with me as I can, you know.
Yes. You have you have a thirst for more of it now. I felt the exact same way, and I love just, there's a thrill for me when I'm introducing someone to Pilates for the first time, and that light bulb just goes off, where they're like, yes, this just makes sense to me. Like Gloria actually just popped on here, Kasperi, and she shared a similar story of just that sense of being strong and being an athlete, and then someone introduces Pilates to you, and then you find strength through a range of motion, and you find little tiny muscles that you never knew you had that are just never had to work, right? Like, and those kind of things, and all these light bulbs go up. So I am almost addicted to giving people that aha moment.
Yes, and exactly. I mean, and even, you know, like I also love the speed with which Pilates can create change in your body.
Yes.
Like you know, in all my years of practicing yoga, what I would hear from teachers is, oh, just keep working, as you work, you know, you will feel better, and, you know, breathe into that space, and, you know, like, you know, and there was never any like concrete what exactly is going to happen, and what exactly, you know, like how is it going to get better. And there's, you know, in yoga, there's also this very common you know, like this common ignorance of, or deliberate ignoring of injuries, saying that it couldn't have been yoga that caused this injury. And, you know, like if you keep doing yoga, what you're uncovering now is a previous pattern that yoga is going to fix if you keep doing the practice. And I find where Pilates is different, it's, you know, if I go to my teacher and I'm working with him, and I kind of say, okay, I'm feeling this, you know, like I'm feeling something in my hip. He will never say, oh, just keep moving the carriage. It will, you know, like the more you move the carriage, the more that pain will go away. You know, he will look at my feet and say, hey, you're not pressing on this side of your foot. Try pressing there, or you're not engaging. I can see your rib. You're not, your ribs are flared. So how about you try doing something about that and see if you still feel that.
Right.
So I feel like Pilates, in Pilates, there's actually more of an awareness of how the body itself works in unity. So,
Absolutely.
yes.
My experience in yoga has been that too. And we're not knocking yoga by any means. But there's a sense of, okay, well, just go into a child's pose if this is uncomfortable for you,
Yes.
and then return when this is comfortable for you. There's a sense of, let's just work around, let's just navigate around.
Yes.
Whereas Pilates, well, no, let's dive deeper into that. Let's understand why. And that comes down to the instructor too, obviously.
Yes.
It does. However, there is that sense of having a real corrective exercise emphasis to our Pilates at times with it.
And I will say there are very good Pilates teachers out there, who do have good knowledge. Like I'm not going to knock people who have dedicated themselves to learning about the human body. They're just far and few between in my experience. And
in the yoga world or in the Pilates world?
In the yoga world. So, from that, because I know I have a couple of yogis probably watching this who are probably disagreeing with everything that I say, but, it is so easy to get certified in yoga. It's such an easy process to get certified. It might not feel like it while you're in the process, but it actually is incredible compared to Pilates anyway. It's incredibly easy. I want to almost guarantee that if you pay for a certification program, you're going to come out of it with a certificate, unless you go in there and you're extremely negative in your actions and behavior. But most of the time, if you pay your $2,000 and you attend all of the hours, whether you show a true understanding for what has happened or not, you will be celebrated as a graduate, and you will get your piece of paper that allows you to go train other people.
Yes.
In Pilates, it's a little bit different. If I forget to tell people to put the headrest down in short spine, I have to do that. I have to do my test out again. It's not negotiable. If I do something that's unsafe, I'm not going to get my certification. I can come back and try again, but I'm not going to get it. And I feel like there has to be more in the yoga world. Maybe there has to be more accountability so that we don't churn out these instructors that are literally going out there and hurting people. Yes, but I don't want to talk about yoga too much because this is a Pilates chat. So we'll get back to.
It's a movement chat. I think that's the whole point. Like even as we were talking about those things, like it really is just a celebration of movement, and Pilates has those. Like there's a minutia to looking at things. You look at it in such a small way to get to the big, that makes a difference, right? It's so funny, like that's small to big to small approach. One of the guys that's usually on our show right now is Harold, a guest I've had who's a track and field guy, speed coach. And he says the same thing, small to big to small. So it implies like you look at the small movements, we have that, then you work into these big movements, and then we come back to just making small adjustments and go back to that big movement. And that's how we ensure that we're always, getting strength of the end of our range of motion, that we're actually strong and not just bendy, like that we are not hurting ourselves and we're not ignoring a faulty movement pattern. Like all that stuff comes into play with it. That truly is the beauty of Pilates.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that you said earlier about how measurable it is too, like in yoga, you flow with these exercises. And one of the things I found about Pilates, and for my male Pilates instructors that are watching right now, Kevin, I'm not sure if there's any others, but I'm sure what resonates with men is the fact that you can say, this is what we're working on. This is the gold star exercise. This is what we're working towards. And they can kind of measure week over week, day over day, that they're getting somewhere with it. In the same way that you would get somewhere with your squat or your bench press, you can get somewhere with your Pilates.
Yes, absolutely. And it's interesting that you mentioned men, because my husband is open to Pilates any day of the week.
Hey, nice.
But I when it comes to yoga, it's a little bit of maybe tomorrow, or well, at least with the asana practice, he'll do meditations, and he'll attend chats and workshops with me. But when it comes to the physical practice of yoga, You know, he's always like, oh, I don't know about that. You know? So
Oh,
yes.
exposing your husband.
I know. Well, you know, well, I'm happy. You know, I'm happy I found Pilates, and at least like you know, he's very open to doing Pilates. So I'm
Nice.
happy. I'm happy as I found this space.
Amazing.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And now, Alexa, one of the things we were talking about in one of our earlier
Hmm.
conversations was bringing this movement practice to Cameroon. You're
Yes.
talking about like how do we connect that side of the world and that community with the Pilates
Hmm.
landscape? What does it look like? What does Pilates look like in Cameroon right now?
I will almost like I can almost guarantee you that it's non-existent.
Really?
It's
Okay.
well, I feel like you know, like when I look generally at the Pilates space, the marketing is not towards you know, it's not really towards people of color, and definitely not towards people who are not living in the Western hemisphere. So like if you don't live in Europe or in North America, I can almost guarantee that you get almost no marketing. Um,
Mm.
and you know, like I mean I understand too that with Pilates, like, you know, logistically, it might be a little bit, you know, difficult to ship equipment there. But you know, like, I don't know. I feel like hopefully over time it will change. I know that there is a couple of Ghanaian Pilates instructors, and I know that in Nigeria there's at least one Pilates studio in Lagos now that's opened up,
Okay.
and there's a couple of teachers there too. And I know that there's a couple of teachers in Kenya, and I mean definitely South Africa. But you know, as an African, I you know like growing up, South Africa was always in a different space. So
Yes.
you know when I think about Africa, I'm not always thinking necessarily about Southern Africa because they have had a slightly different evolution over time than the rest of the continent. Um, but yeah, so in Cameroon, I would say Pilates is non-existent. I know for a lot of my friends, I'm like their first, you know, like they're like, what is Alexa doing? Like that's
Mm.
an interesting thing, you know? Um, so yeah, you know, I'm hoping that by people seeing me and by, you know, working with people that I know, you know, we can share the magic that is Pilates and it can become a thing that is normal in Cameroon and other spaces of Africa.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's very encouraging to see. I want to say her Instagram handle is Sanka off Pilates.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes, I follow
so
her.
I think she shipped some equipment to Ghana, and you know, like I'm even more excited. I've never been to Ghana, but I'm even more excited to go now that I know that I will be able to go to a studio when I'm there.
Hmm.
And definitely, like you know, like having a studio in some of the capital cities is you know it's exciting to see that happening, and if I can be part of bringing awareness to the space, then you know that will I guess my work will be done.
Yes, or just
Yes,
beginning.
but I have to say every single person that I have done Pilates with, you know, if this is their first experience, loves it. They're
Yes.
like it's yeah, they love it. You know, it's yeah. So I feel like there's a market out there, and it's just waiting.
It is waiting,
Hmm.
but the question remains, how do we make it accessible?
I think by reaching out to like with anything else, if you communicate to people that it's available, um, then and it comes up in their awareness, then it then it becomes accessible too. Like if
Hmm.
people demand, if they ask for it, you know, like if
Yep.
it's like it's like you know like if it's like somebody going to Ghana and opening up a Pilates studio there, that makes it accessible to the people of that area, of that town.
Right.
Um, so I feel like how it becomes accessible is just by you know either by offering can be online. I'm doing online offerings now because obviously I'm not based in Cameroon, but
Right.
by offering and creating awareness that this is something that's out there that you might be interested in, and you know hopefully eventually you know studios will start to open up, or you know people will just start to buy mats and practice at home.
Right.
Yes. So. Mhm.
That just made me think of something too. I mean, because there's a real hard reality of the economics of that, right? Like if you look behind me, those two pieces
Mhm.
of equipment, if you look online, you're looking at like 15 grand by
Yeah.
time it's shipped from, the US to Canada,
Hmm.
out the door, duties, exchange, shipping. So if you think about how you're gonna get that to Cameroon from the closest distribution center,
Hmm.
plus paying for overhead for a space, plus paying for, that's why I ask accessibility,
But
because how do you keep it
that comes
open?
with the assumption that we cannot make it ourselves.
Right.
And that comes with the assumption that we need to buy it from the West. I can
Mm.
almost guarantee you that if you show someone that equipment in Cameroon, they can make it for you by the end of the week.
Ha, there you go.
So,
Erica Lightbright, I just said the same thing, right? Like, what about the
yes,
cost? What about keeps exactly? There's a sticker shock. I'm
yes,
just recognizing people's comments. Cameroonians can make the equipment. Boom. Like, there
yeah.
people.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It's the equipment I think is one stump, like it's minor.
Hmm.
I think having teachers is much that would be the harder the harder struggle. But
Yes.
if people were to become, I remember there was, and it's been a few years now, so I can't remember exactly what the movement was, but there was a group at some point in time that decided to go to Kenya. I don't know why they chose Kenya, but they decided to go to Kenya and teach, just certify Kenyans in the practice of yoga.
Yes.
Um, and all of a sudden, you had, yoga became a thing in Kenya.
Right. Right.
There's no reason why Pilates cannot become a thing in in most African countries. And while I
Hmm.
agree, there's I have to tread carefully here because I don't want
Yes.
to come out and say that Africa from an economic standpoint that African countries have no problems and that they're equal to their Western counterparts. But there's a huge middle class in most African
Centers.
countries, and the
Right.
middle class
Absolutely.
is only growing. So
Hmm.
there's a huge middle class. It's growing, and they have an appetite for all of these
Right.
all of these formats. I mean,
Right.
the amount of friends I have who call me and or say we wish we had a studio. We wish, when I
Yes.
was when I was spending most of my time focused on yoga, it was, I
Hmm.
would constantly get people, wanting to like find out, like like how can we bring a studio here, or like they would complain about not having access to facilities. So I think there is an appetite
Yes.
for these formats. And just like Legacy Pilates in Turkey, because in Turkey, Pilates is a really big thing. And I
Right.
want to say, from an economic standpoint, I don't know if Turkey is necessarily a first world country, but I know that there's also, there's also like people who can't afford, I guess there's people who are, um, I don't want to say the word poor, but have
Hmm.
less in every country.
Yes.
However, in Turkey, Pilates is, I feel like I see so many Pilates teachers, and I want to say Pilates TV is also
I
Turkish.
think
If it's
so.
not
Right.
Turkish,
Yep.
then
Right.
it has a huge Turkish following for sure.
Yes.
Um, how did that happen? I mean, they make their own equipment. Same with South America. In
Right.
Brazil, there's definitely a lot of economic problems, but Pilates is huge in Brazil. I mean, a lot of the equipment now comes from Brazil. So,
That's exactly
yeah.
it. And I was
Mhm.
thinking, as you were saying that, like even for someone like Gratz,
Mhm.
and doing some work with Gratz on their show
Mhm.
tomorrow, I have to say that's one of the things that companies like that have a good reputation in the US
Mhm.
should probably think about. How do we tie into social empowerment? Like, why can't
Mhm.
someone like Gratz, who has a name here, go to
Mhm.
Cameroon and just work with, you have the resources. Do you have steel? Do you have wood? Do you have leather? Do you have foam? This is
Yeah.
how we do it. And you don't have to like transplant your
Mhm.
whole operation. You can
Mhm.
consult with people there and just give them the
Yeah.
strategies to use and just empower the people with it.
Mhm.
That's a great way, because the reality is that your equipment's only as good as your education,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So when you're
Yeah.
educating people on how to do those things, empower those places in the world, and that's how you get
Mhm.
your name out. And starting to instead of trying to ship something from Pennsylvania to Cameroon, why don't you ship a
Yeah.
person to
Yeah.
Cameroon
You could
and
have a
get them to,
representative, like if you have a reliable person on ground who is responsible for distribution in that space. The equipment, I honestly feel like, is the least of the, is the least of the
That's
the problem.
The next point.
Yeah.
Right.
I think education is much more, because Pilates education, even compared to other, like compared to being a personal trainer or compared to being, so many other things in the health and wellness space, is actually quite expensive. It's, I guess it has to be because there's so much that you have to go through, but the education is so much more expensive than other formats that are out there. And yes, in some cases you get paid a little bit more as a Pilates instructor, but not necessarily. I wouldn't say that Pilates instructors make more than most personal trainers. I feel like, it's kind of, if you're a good personal trainer, you might even be making more than most Pilates instructors. But it costs about $400 to $1,000 to become a personal trainer, versus at least $4,000 to be a Pilates instructor.
Right.
So I feel like education might be the barrier, and also the continuing education in Pilates is so much more expensive. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. We should talk offline about just like getting some business going in Cameroon, because even as I just said that off the top, I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea.
I know, right? Yeah.
We could totally.
And I'm not sure where Gratz gets their wood from, if it's American wood, but
it doesn't matter.
I know that
like
I know that growing up.
Wood.
Yeah, I know that growing up in Cameroon, I saw a lot of wood leaving. So I know it's going somewhere. And not that I want to encourage cutting down the rainforest, but it's like there are raw materials available, and a lot of times the labor is cheaper, and we have amazing craftsmen. It's we have people who are amazing woodworkers who in a very short space of time can deliver amazing products.
Right.
So why not?
Social empowerment. Call Alexa. Noted. All right. We good. All right. It is about 9:45, and
Yes.
I have to transition. I have Sal shows are coming on next as well.
Yes.
And it's interesting how we talked with Maria yesterday about Kathy Grant and that legacy. He has a very similar legacy with Mari Windsor.
Yes.
Right. So it's going to be really interesting talking about legacy with these people, and how we continue to let this Pilates work grow and let it become part of us, so that we can have that opportunity to share with others. So that's really going to be pretty cool to see.
And that's another thing that, I would like to see more of. As a Black Pilates instructor, like, for example, when I was creating my website, I kind of went out there and I was trying to find images, like vintage images of, Black people doing Pilates. I know they're out there. They're images, but I feel, and I don't know who's holding on to them, but I feel like there's almost this like, oh, no, we're going to keep these pictures and we're not going to share them with anybody because we want to protect the legacy of that person. But at the same time, it means that we don't get to see that side of history, and we don't get to see, who's that? Let me see.
That's me. That's my.
Oh, sorry, I can't see clearly, so I'm like trying to look.
I'll post it on after, but my wife made this infographic.
When at first when I saw it, I thought it was a drawing. So you might have to send that to me so that I can have a picture of like some, like some Black people on my website.
Absolutely. She's so talented. Anyway.
Yes. Well, we might have to speak to your wife too then. Like, she might be able to help us with creating like, images like that. But I would like to. And it's funny that you bring that up. I know you have to go. So one more. I was on a call with Blossom from Bridge Pilates, and so we know about Kathy Grant, but she showed me a picture, and there was another man in there, and he, there was another Black man in that picture, and I wonder why I've never seen that picture before, because we hear so much about Kathy Grant, but obviously there were other students of Joseph Pilates too who were Black. It wasn't just one. And he probably worked with other Black people too. Maybe they weren't his lifelong students, but there was definitely one, and we don't know who he is, We
should call Sonia. She's like the bounty hunter for Black men in Pilates. So
I know.
I'm sure she could track him down.
I'm sure she'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah,
But
totally.
yes, I've been, I think Sean Gallagher owns that picture.
Okay.
And I know
Like
he has a
owns the
lot.
picture?
Huh?
Like
Yes.
owns the picture.
Well,
Okay.
Blossom was saying that it's in his book, but I think his book is like $100 or something crazy like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would just like to like ask the, Pilates community to be more open with resources and sharing.
Thank
And,
you.
like I remember Kathy Ross Nash saying on your podcast that, there in the past there was this sense of I'm going to hold on to a little bit. I'm not going to share everything. And
Yes.
I feel like that has not helped so much. It has not helped bring people to the table. It has not helped open up the doors to people who don't look like dancers and,
Yes.
who come from all walks of life. And I feel like that does have to start happening in in the community so that we see more. We see just a different face. We don't just see just
Absolutely.
constantly the same people. But
Yeah, that's true. And I so much respect to Kathy for saying that because
mhm,
Kathy Ross Nash, because like she has such great content out there that is so accessible and so
yes.
available. So
And
I
she's
just
probably making more money because she's doing it, because she's
right.
sharing.
And instead of
Yes.
holding on to it
Yes.
so preciously, it's out
Hmm.
there, and that elevates us. We need to be able to really
Hmm.
give that information, and that's how we all get better.
Yes.
Alexa, thank you so much. Such
No
a great
problem. Thank you
chat.
for having me on.
Hmm.
Um, I will be following and I'll be encouraging more people to follow. And thank you
All
for
right.
doing this too. Like I think I wrote to you, I've always wondered what a Pilates podcast would look like. And I think I finally know now.
Oh, thank you.
So yes, thank you for starting this.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today on Core Conversations. This organic platform has been made possible by amazing people like yourself. So if you're a Pilates instructor or a movement specialist of some kind and you want to be a guest, please message me. If you're in some other field and the messages just resonate with you, message me. I'd love to have you on. All of our messages connect, and for some reason, they all help us in this battle. We're all in this game together, so I'd love to hear from you. Let your words be life to someone else. Check out our website, personalvictory.ca. Click the Core Conversations page to see who our upcoming guests are, and I will see you next time on Core Conversations.